Dear students, as we have started our lectures in genetics, so before starting our journey into genetics, we have a need or we require to understand some fundamental concepts for the start of our journey into genetics. These fundamental concepts, first of all, is that you should all be aware that cells are of two basic types. First is the eukaryotic type and second one is the prokaryotic type. And although evolutionary this story is more complex, but we basically define or we basically categorize or differentiate cells into prokaryotic or eukaryotic cells. And you all are very much aware that prokaryotic cells are basically those cells which lack cell membranes or and also lack the membrane bound organelles, while eukaryotic cells are the cells which basically contains the cell membrane and they also have the membrane bound organelles. Second is the second fundamental concept is that gene is the fundamental unit of heredity. The precise way in which a gene is defined often varies depending on the biological context. At the simplest level, we can think that gene is the unit of information that basically encodes genetic characteristics. We will learn in detail in our next lectures. But these genes, which are basically the fundamental unit of heredity, that genes comes in multiple forms, which are known as the alleles. A gene that specifies a characteristic may exist in several forms, and these forms are known as the allele. For example, a gene for the coat color in cats may exist as an allele that encodes black fur or as an allele that encodes orange fur. So that alleles basically comes in multiple form, which is also genes comes in multiple forms. Next important fundamental concept is that gene basically confers the phenotype. One of the most important concept in genetics is the distinction between the traits and the genes. Traits are not inherited directly, rather genes are inherited and along with the environmental factors determines the expression of traits. So that expression of traits is basically is the phenotype. That is very important or fundamental concept for the study of genetics. Next is that genetic information is carried in DNA and RNA. Genetic information that is basically encoded in molecular structures of nucleic acids, which are of two types. First is the DNA and second is the RNA. DNA, you also know that is the deoxyribonucleic acid and RNA is the ribonucleic acid. And the nitrogenous bases in DNA are of four types, such as the adenine, thymine, cytosine and guanine, while in RNA there is a variation. Instead of thymine there is a uracil. So you also are very much aware about the DNA and RNA, and that is also very important to understand about DNA and RNA before understanding the genetics. Next is the important concept is that location of the genes. Genes are basically located on the chromosomes. Chromosomes, the vehicle of genetic information within a cell is the chromosome, which consists of DNA and associated proteins. The cells of each species have a characteristic number of chromosomes. For example, bacterial cell normally possess a single chromosome, while human cells possess 46 chromosomes. So these chromosomes are basically the vehicles which carry the genes. Next is that the chromosome separates through the process of mitosis and meiosis. This is also very an important process of division that ensures the complete set of organisms chromosomes exist in each cell resulting from the cell division. Mitosis is basically the separation of chromosomes in the division of somatic or non-sex cells, while meiosis is the pairing and separation of chromosomes in division of sex cells to produce the different types of gametes. Next fundamental concept is that genetic information is transferred from DNA to RNA, then to the protein. That is also known as the central dogma of life. And there are many genes encode traits by specifying the structure of the proteins, and genetic information is first transcribed from DNA to RNA and then from RNA to the protein, which is also known as the central dogma of life. Next is the mutation is permanent change in genetic information that can be passed from cell to cell or from parent to the offspring. That is also very fundamental concept in the to understand the genetics, that if there is mutation in the genetic information or there is a change in the genetic information, that change will pass from one cell to another cell, and that change will also transfer from parents to the offspring. Some traits are affected by multiple factors. There are no single factors which associate or which brings mutation within the genetic information. There are various factors, and that factors could be environmental factors or that factors could be inherited factors. So human height, for example, is affected by hundreds of genes as well as the environmental factors such as nutrition. If there is nutrient deficiency, then height will also suffer. Next fundamental concept is evolution, which is basically the change in genetics, and evolution can also be viewed as a two-step process. First is the genetic variation, and second is the someone's genetic variants increase in frequency while other variant decrease in frequency, and that increase or decrease in frequency because of variation in genetics results in the evolution of results in the evolution. So these are different fundamental concepts which should be very clear before the start of our journey into genetics. Thank you.